Hey, everybody.
Hi. It's me, Corey.
Hi, Corey.
Yeah. I'm not at home, everyone. I'm on the lam.
Corey bought a new house with all of the money we made from the two episodes of our playtest.
No, Taylor, I broke into a house because I'm on the run from the government for breaking into the Dulce base. That's right, the base with all the extraterrestrials.
Yeah, that's what buying a house is.
I bought the house.
That is
good code.
The house.
That's good code right there.
So did you buy this house? Well, it's mine.
Actually, I've been listening to a bunch of so I'm staying at my brother's house right now, because he's on vacation, and I'm watching the place for him and their cats.
That's a nice place. It's a cute little cat.
It's all right. Yeah, it's all right. So I've been listening to a bunch of alien stuff, which I shouldn't because I'm in the middle of the woods.
Now, is that like conspiracy theories dealing with aliens, or is that like you reading into fan fiction from the alien universe, or
both are viable.
Tight.
I would write fan fiction in the Alien universe, and it would just be like, all this is so tight. It's fucking dope. It's not even conspiracy. So I listened to a podcast about Betty and Barney Hill. Taylor, are you familiar with so Betty and Barney Hill is the first abduction scenario that ever occurred in the United States. I think it might be
not familiar.
Might be the first abduction story. Happened in New Hampshire. Not far from here. Actually, New Hampshire has a ton of UFO action. The White Mountains in particular, where I live, is a hotbed of alien activity kind of thing. Alien activity, I should say. I don't know.
Yeah, for the record, this is not things that we necessarily believe in. It's just we are remarking on the cultural significance of these things.
Right.
We're not that kind of stream.
Well, and I don't know. Alien abductions, clearly something goes wrong in those stories normally, because it normally ruins people's fucking lives. I don't know if it's aliens abducting people, but something happens, and then shit, maybe it's a mental break, who knows? But anyways, it's just an interesting story because Betty and Barney Hill were an interracial couple in New Hampshire in the early 60s, late 50s. It's an interesting story. That being said, though I'm not sure I believe in things like that, I do lock the door at night afterwards, and I'm shouldn't have listened to that.
Yeah, so my significant other, I love them so much, but easily their worst trait is that they are obsessed with true crime and true crime podcasts. And they are one of the weird people who need that shit to fall asleep.
No!
Oh, dog, it's so bad. I wake up at 3 a.m. and it's this serial killer's lone surviving victim recounting her horrific experience at the hands of this monster, and I'm just laying in bed at 3 a.m. because I woke up because I had to pee, and I'm just sitting there
Why do you have a whole bag of door locks? Because we need more of them.
Because there are not enough in the fucking world. Yeah, no, so anyways. Suffice it to say, I lock my fucking doors all the time.
And here's my thing with aliens, it's what's that gonna do? And I'm it's gonna provide me a little bit of comfort, is what it's going to do. Maybe they can get in. I don't care. I hope that their memory wipe technology is on lock, because I'd prefer not to remember it.
Elstragoon, if you tell me what this thing is that you heard about why people need stuff like that, I feel like it's going to reflect poorly on my significant other, and so I don't want to know.
Anyways, we are wildly off topic.
Wildly. So first things first. Sorry, we are not following through more on the playtest. Unfortunately, as you can read from our titles, one of our playtesters is down with the sickness. So they are, and they are recovering right now. We should be back next week, assuming everything goes normal and according to plan. Okay, he said us anyways. Okay, something if you're used to having anxiety, the lack of anxiety is discomforting. You need to increase your anxiety to feel normal. Oh.
That makes sense.
That actually makes a lot of sense, in all honesty. I guess.
And I listen to comedy podcasts because I'm just full of goose all the time. When I don't have a dick joke, I don't feel normal.
God, I haven't had a dick joke in 15 minutes. I'm getting the shakes.
That being said, we are going to talk about what is quickly becoming the game that I want to approach.
Your new obsession.
Yeah,
your new toy.
Vere.
So we talked about this a couple of weeks ago. Vere is it's like a mishmash of different genres and I don't know what the word is. Genres and vibes all just kind of smashed together into a single game. You said that you had some stuff to add to that, so let's talk about that with our free week.
Yeah, so one thing that like I think there is a central theme to Evolve Vere, right? Like it is this idea of like high flying action.
Yeah.
It is being able to do to accomplish internal goals. They're just like crazy feats. Like you are like an astronaut samurai, and it's definitely got like a Western aesthetic or pastiche over everything.
Yeah.
So I'd say that is the collected theme. So that being said, I've been thinking a lot about movement in games, and we have right now Vault Peddlers, which is very tactical. It is much more of a simulationist game, and I would definitely like to move away from that with Evolve Vere. And something I've been thinking about a lot is like either being able to having a system for movement that would make like theater of the mind, or at least partial theater of the mind, possible, and like something that you could take this abstraction and build a map to. So my general idea is to have physical space represented by set pieces. So like they are important set pieces. So if you are like traveling through space, you could have an exoplanet, and you could have these like an asteroid belt and a space station, and then the void, and those would, and like North Void, South Void kind of thing, and those could be your like physical set pieces.
Okay.
And then all of those set pieces you could move from depending on like your proximity to them. But also something I really wanted to play with was the idea of like tags. So having like basically you remember hard moves and soft moves in Pbta games?
Yeah, absolutely.
Like that applied to geographical locations. So you could have like narrative tags and then conditional tags. So like you could have a tag that's a soft move, like this area is explosive. And then you could have like a conditional tag that this area is burning. So you could like set up these tags onto the physical set piece, where players could not see them, or players can actually manipulate the tags by like doing things to the area. And one thing that really got me excited about this was the idea of criticals in the game.
Yeah.
Allowing players to like change the narrative or descriptor tags, or put on conditional tags onto set pieces. And notably, this doesn't have to just be combat, right? Like, because you could do a narrative piece in a bar where it's like, this section of the bar has, the narrative tag, like, people, potential information. And, like, you could, like, make a critical roll on something and change that narrative tag as a player to, like, the conditional tag, they tell me who's in charge. Okay. Things like that. So, I mean, obviously, this is a much different approach to game development than Vault Peddlers is.
For sure.
But I got really jazzed on that idea, mostly because I think it's an interesting way to handle crits beyond traditional, like, you just do better and try to beat a number. And I think it's a fun way to play around with, like, conditions of the area, and you have the power as a player, which we're talking about high-flying action, like, you have the power to, like, change things to make it better for you. And the idea of physical set pieces being the areas, it makes movement a lot more fluid, because, like, I can run along the asteroid belt and then move to one set piece over to the space station, which as the GM you would dictate, like, you hop from fucking asteroid to asteroid and land superhero style onto this space station. Now I'm done.
Okay, so let's talk about a couple of things. So first things first, you initially started talking about movement, and then we've branched off into tags and then criticals and all that stuff. So I want to try and parse this into little sections here. So let's start with movement. So you have this idea that instead of, like, for example, hexes on a map, right? You basically just have set pieces, right? So there would be, let's say in our imaginary theater of the mind, like, map, right? You have, like, the nuclear reactor core, you have the computer that, like, controls, like, the ventilation settings, you have the front door, you have the security guard station, all that stuff.
You have the catwalk.
Yeah, exactly. So it would be more about setting up these pieces, and then how would it work as far as determining, I don't know, the length from one of these things to the other? Is it just like you can move from one station to the other every turn? Is that the idea?
Yeah, I think the idea would have to be you can move to, like, an adjacent station.
Okay.
And this is where, like, theater of the mind stuff would, like, we have to work this out, because like I think it's like a good mechanic for, like, developing, like, a map. Like, because you could draw a map pretty easily from this and be like, okay, this is one set piece.
Totally.
This is one set piece. And, like, that could work. But, like, it would be cool to make this so that you could have, like, theater of the mind stuff, which I guess you could still do as the GM if you're, like, if you write down, like, the list of things.
Sure.
Which you'd probably have to do in this game if things
that was
going
to be my first thing, right? Is that this is going to put a lot of pressure on the GM to, for every area you're in, making a list of, like, what these stations are and what they would be. And that's not inherently bad. I actually think that's personally, I think that's helpful, because I do that kind of stuff in my own GM prep all the time.
Yeah.
Like that tracks to me. Where I do see it becoming potentially a problem, and this kind of brings me back to when I was a teacher and when I tried to bring tabletop games into the classroom a couple of times. One of the things that I did, it was like an adventure that was, like, set in, like, colonial America and, like, all this other stuff. And I had kind of what you're talking about. Like, I had, like, like, I forget what the stations were. There was, like, like, there was, like, a Patriot camp of soldiers with, like, I had, like, a medical tent, an officer's tent, like the barracks, and then I had, like, the town that had, like, a bakery, a library, like, an archives, all this other stuff. Yeah. And ultimately what I had to do, right, and this is where my big concern comes in, because I've lived this, is for every area I had to go in, I had to list out all of these different stations every time. And the players don't remember them, and then you have to reiterate them for every area you go into. That is my biggest concern with the movement system you're talking about.
I mean, at that point, like, I think we are just talking about, like, theater of the mind. Because have you done much gaming with, like, we've been playing games for a while. But we do like physical maps and stuff. Have you done much, like, I guess in one of our the Call of Cthulhu game we used to play was a lot of this.
Well, and I would argue, actually, Ruma was, like, a fair bit of theater of the mind.
Yeah.
Like most of our PBTA stuff didn't use physical maps. I know I brought one or two physical maps into it for, like, bigger fights, but most of that was theater of the mind.
So I grew up playing, like, theater of the mind because we were lazy and didn't want to draw maps.
Absolutely, so, like, totally get it.
Yeah, and like this is, like, I think at a certain point with theater of the mind, you do have to, like, let go and just reiterate, like, positional things,
right?
Because it's like you kind of have to, right? Like.
Right.
Unless everyone's brain is far flung, but this also has the extra weight on it of putting tags on things in, which we could, like. as a GM, I don't think that's particularly hard. As a GM, I think that's actually pretty easy prep. Like,
Yeah.
I write down four stations in this room and then put a couple tags on them, and then I'm just tracking the tags and player position on them throughout the game. Like, I don't think that's particularly hard, but to a player, that might be a lot. On the same token, like, players aren't going to know half the tags, right? Like, because a lot of these tags are going to be narrative for you just to, like, put exposition out, and then players can infer. But I do agree that there is some weight there that we'd have to manage, and likely expedite. And maybe this is the case where it is like, where like a cat's page would be super helpful here. I definitely see it being something that, like, you could take like this list of words and then just draw a couple circles on a piece of paper and be like, okay, these are like all the areas.
Absolutely, right?
Yeah.
Like, and I think that, like, that's kind of how you would have to. I think ultimately that's how you would have to do it. Which, to be fair to you, that's very doable. Whether you're playing in person, whether you're playing on a VTT, like, anything that you would be playing with has, like, tools for you to do that, right? Whether you're doing it on just pen and paper, or, like, we usually play on Roll20, and, like, that has, like, a very simple, like, text option, and then, like, you know, drawing lines and all that stuff. So, like, that's not hard. So yeah, I don't know. It's just a concern, I think, that came up when you were talking about it.
And like, I agree. That's like one thing I was thinking of with like tags. I'm like, oh, that can get weighty, which is like what we want to keep down. I
do like the idea of associated tags that players can change with crits. Like, that I think is a neat idea. The more we've dived into Vault Peddlers, the more I've become interested in kind of more collaborative stuff behind the screen. In addition to, like, in front of it. So I'm totally into the idea of Vere kind of embracing that idea and being a little bit more like, you know, I give you something about the area, you give me something about the area, and then we kind of make room in that space together.
Well, and I think it works with what we were talking about with, like, you taking on a like, not a mentor. What was the word we were using? Like, what do they call it for fucking warlocks at D&D?
Oh, patron?
Yeah, like taking on a patron to get power sets and, like, describing those power sets and, like, narratively taking out a tag from them, like having like the natural interaction between those and like descriptive tags on set pieces. Like, because if I'm always on fire and I land on something that's explosive, that is going to have an effect. Like,
yeah. So Els Dragoon has brought something up here. This sounds a lot more like these new GM-less gamebook type things that are coming out a lot, with scenarios and grids on the pages of a book that you leave open and play right on top of with the sets and tags and stuff. Do you guys ever see that Golem Arcana game? No, I have no idea what that is. You know Golem Arcana?
I'm not familiar with that. I'm definitely familiar with the games he's talking about.
Yeah.
I don't have, by the way, guys, I don't have chat up, so I'm sorry if I'm ignoring anyone.
Yeah, which is why I'm narrating questions, just for everyone's edification.
Yeah, and I think it makes sense that, like, this is definitely borrowing a lot from, like, Blades in the Dark and borrowing a lot from PBTA, and, like, what I'm doing is, like, picking what I like out of rules-like games, and I want to, like, codify it into a more trad game. Because I think there's good stuff there. I just want it to feel more gamey than they tend to.
Yeah, my issue with PBTA games is not really the theater of the mind aspect. Truth be told, I kind of love that. My issue, honestly, with PBTA is it's two things. I think that most PBTA games, like they try to take GM roles completely out of the game, which I actually don't really like. I think that
neither do I.
I like the level of depth that gives to NPCs where you can roll on their behalf. I don't like the idea that players get to like bring somebody into their murder cult without them really having a say-so on it, right? And my other
resolution system.
My other big issue with PBTA games is the advancement system. It's based on, with most of the ones that we've played, it's based on like how many times you fail a roll. And so if you have like a really shit session, then you level up like maybe once or maybe even twice, depending on just how bad it actually goes. And that often, like in the long run, just kills your game. Because, 5 or 6 sessions in, your character has leveled up to a point where like, now they don't ever miss. Now they always succeed on their roll. And now they're always bringing new fucking people into your murder cult that you have to create a voice for.
What?
So
I
yeah,
got
no.
7 of those clowns right off the bat.
Beyond that, though, like I actually really like PBTA. I like those are obviously 2 very big critiques of the system, but I like that it's mostly theater of the mind. I like that it's really rules light and versatile in that way. But I think
want it to be a game.
Yeah, but
like,
I think that if you're going to make it something like that, it's got to have a little bit more weight to it than what PBTA has.
Well, and like on the idea of power sets here, like one thing I really like about the idea of Vere is like you taking on a patron or bonds that provide you like powered tags or equipment or whatever that do things. But the idea of this game is that like you're breaking bonds, you're solving these internal struggles and like getting things taken from you through action in the universe. So like those things go away and you supplant them with new things. So like my idea here is not so much progression. What just happened?
Oh, sorry. Please finish, and then I promise I'll tell you.
Not so much progression as like a like shifting kind of lateral move, like maybe some elements of progression, but like more that like your character is nebulous, like this fucking miasma of the universe.
Right. No, that's it exactly, right? Is like I want it to be something that is more concrete, a little bit less nebulous. So sorry. Elstragoon explained what Golem Arcana is. Get this shit. Golem Arcana is a miniature game, but it has like a scan pen thing, a piece of tech that scans all of the minis and handles all the rules. It's a tech-heavy thing, I guess, but someone trying to encode the rules into the miniatures. That's fucking wild. That's tight as shit.
Very cool. So like, it's interesting. Like with the era of like VTT, there's this, I forget the name of it, but there's this paranormal game that plays with your VoIP settings by cutting the camera in and out and cutting the mic. And fuck? Like it's like a spooky game, but like it's a TTRPG that like plays with those settings to. I'm like, and that's something that you can only do in a in a
VTT. What the fuck?
Yeah, man. Like we're in a new age.
I don't need a game that messes with my VoIP or like messes with like the next one's gonna fuck with your IP address. Like,
well, I mean, it's like, are you familiar with that game Lose Lose?
No, I don't know it.
I forget the guy's name, which I'm kicking myself for doing. He's a game developer, and he makes these like funky games. But like one of them was this like school project he did called Lose Lose, and the idea is that when you lose, it just deletes a random folder off of your computer, which is like. It's crazy because it can delete like a system folder and like fuck up your computer. But it was like he makes these like really like strange but cool concepts.
Awful games.
Well, he made this one called Dumb Chess, which is really cool. That like randomizes the chess piece for you and your opponent, so you each have a random. But they're like evenly random, so black and white are the same. But like you each get a random assortment of set pieces, and you have to figure out how to play chess with the pieces that are set up on the board.
That honestly doesn't sound dumb. That sounds very hard, and you need to be very smart to do it.
It's these like lateral thinking kinds of approaches to gaming that like I'm just very interested in.
Yeah, no, that sounds tight. But okay, so bringing it back to Valdevere. El Valdevere. So the whole idea then is to make something that like has rules light feel to it and that has that versatility to it, but also has a little bit more of the weight of like a trad game.
Yeah. So I think you could like it as a GM, we could make like a like area trees. And the cool thing about like how this is like set up is I think you can do this in the macro and the micro, right? Like because you can do this with set pieces in a solar system all the way down to like set pieces in a bar room.
Yeah.
But like we could have like a tree where you write down the different set pieces in your game and like probably want to keep it like, I don't know, 6 to 8 pieces, something like that. So there's enough room for movement. You can do cool things, but like not enough where it's like totally overwhelming. And you as the GM could, as you write down this tree, have like place them so that they are either branches or one on top of each other so that you know which ones that they can move to. The idea being that like now you can like set tags on these players. If they crit, can put tags on them or maybe shuffle the tree. I don't know. Just thinking out loud, but like which actually would be very cool for like these high flying, big, powerful movement if you fucking like throw the fucking catwalk into the fucking reactor, right?
It's
like
pretty tight.
So that is something we could have probably movement then. We could break it down to everyone starts with 1. Like you can like traditionally each character has 1. Now you can get equipment and powers from whoever your what do you call it? What do we say the word was? Patron?
Yeah.
Whoever your patron is that could increase your movement, but like as it stands you'd start at 1. So like you know, if you bumped it up to 2 or 3, you could fucking do that, like run across the asteroid field off the fucking meteor into the fucking space station.
Right.
So I don't know. I mean, I think that like kind of solves the idea of movement though. Like you get 1.
I think that it's going to be an interesting thing when we look at stuff like what's the word, like challenged territories and stuff like that, how that affects movement and what that means for like it's definitely going to be a game where I think that if we're planting this flag here, what I'm seeing coming down the road is that tags are going to become the main what's the word, mechanic of this system. So like we're going to need to have a very filled out list, I think, of tags and what they mean mechanically, right? So like, for example, if the tag on the asteroid belt is like dangerous, then we need to have a definition of what dangerous is and like what kind of role it means for them to get through it. Have a good one, El Stragoon. We'll see you later. See you next week. Bye.
So I think we can do a couple of things here.
Yeah.
We can probably define conditional tags and give an example of conditional and narrative tags, and define like what they can do to an area. Like if this is burning, how does burning work kind of stuff.
Right.
But I think like all we can really do is offer like a broad selection of them and what they mean, and then post underneath, by the way, like this is like by its nature, this tag system is going to differ from table to table, right? Like,
Yeah.
these are good examples, but it's whatever makes sense in fiction at the time.
Yeah.
Has to take precedent.
Yeah.
So I totally agree with you, especially defining like conditional tags, like if something is like occupied or dangerous or burning or electric, like I think that is something we should probably sit down and define as much of as we can. But like the other thing is like once we have those definitions, we can be like, if this applies to burning, you can also apply this to electrocuted, right? Like
Sure.
it's like, yeah, you can shift that definition if it makes sense. So I say all of that to say, yes, I agree.
We love long-winded one-word responses. Yeah, no, I mean, I think that that's really it, right? Okay, cool. So that's movement then. And it sounds like we've talked a lot about tags. You had mentioned crits in your initial answer. Talk to me a little bit about that. What do you have in mind? Because right now our basic mechanic for rolling in this game is it's just a standard D20 against a TN. Are we keeping that or no?
So I think that there's a couple ways to approach this.
Yeah.
You can have like we could do like a dice pool where it's like you collect die pools for relevant tags or things that help you, and then roll, and then pick the highest one or the highest two if you're like super advantaged on it, or if you're super disadvantaged, pick the lowest two kind of thing. But I think that might be a neat way to do that, where it's just like or we can go like the flat target value route, which would be like you roll a d20 and then for each relevant tag you get like a +2 on it, right?
Right.
I think those are like the options I'd be most interested in. I think it's kind of neat to like being able to like pick up die on like relevant tags and then rolling them, and then, you know, depending on the situation, taking the highest one or two or lowest one or two, and going like that. Because then like the impetus is still, I'm trying to garner tags that are useful, right?
Right.
But I don't know. I'm curious to see.
So can you just explain that a little bit? So these die that you would pick up from other tags, would these be additional to the D20? Or are we throwing the D20 entirely out the window and just saying, depending on what tag you're working with, that affects the die that you're rolling?
So this idea would be like, say instead of a D20, we just use D10s.
Okay.
For each relevant tag, or each like positive like advantage you have going for you on a roll, you add a die to your roll.
Okay.
And then you roll it, and then if it's standard, you'd take the highest one that you roll. If it's like something that you're super advantaged on, you would take the highest two. If it's something you're disadvantaged on, you take the lowest one. But the idea being that like the more die you add to this pool, the higher chances you have of rolling like a 10. Which would make it,
and unless you have like a very bad tag, in which case rolling like 5d10 is a huge detriment to you.
Sure, yeah. Same idea, but yeah, like that would be the like that is a system I'd be interested in approaching. Okay. I think they both have their advantages. I think that a flat like D20 or D10 is like, we can do something very easy where it's like you just have to beat a 10, and that's like standard.
Okay.
I think Lancer does this with like their narrative rolls. You just have to beat a 10. So we could do something like that.
Well, so what if we hear me out here. What if we met somewhere in the middle of this? Because I like the idea of having the built-in advantage-disadvantage system that you're talking about here. What if you have a stat array, and we can decide what those stats are, and then like for each of those things, you have like, 1 through, I don't know, like a 5 at like your highest. And like the 5 is basically saying that like for every time you make this roll, you start out with 5d10 or d20 or whatever it is, and then you have I'm trying to think of how to phrase this. Like the TN would be like a negative modifier against that dice pool so that it counts against them, but you still roll like the number that you have left after applying the TN, and then you take the highest or lowest or whatever of those dice. Does that make sense?
Kind of sounds complicated.
Okay. So like, let's just say on our stat array, we have strength. Let's say I make a super strong character and I start with a 5 in strength. That means that normally if I make a strength roll, then I would have 5d10 that I would roll. We're following that?
Yeah.
Okay. Let's say I'm trying to lift a fucking barge or some shit. And the GM is like, look, this is really fucking difficult to do. So I'm going to put the TN for this at 4, right? And so what that means is of my 5, 4 of them are gone. And now I can only roll 1d10 and I have to take that result. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I don't hate that. Okay, so hear me out.
Yeah.
Mine is a bit of a different approach. I would posit get rid of attributes altogether and lean into the tag thing.
Okay.
So if you're going to do something, standard you roll 1 die. But if you're doing something like lifting a rock and your character has like incredible grip as a tag, like I would add another die to that.
Okay.
And we could have a standard, hard, like difficult, like moderate, difficult, easy, like that you have to meet, right? Like if it's a simple thing, it's a 5. Like Dungeons and Dragons, simple thing 5.
Totally.
Yeah. Do something like that. So for each relevant tag, you're just adding a die to that. If it is a relevant tag in the other way, you're taking either you would be taking a die away, or you could probably play around with taking the lowest result. I don't know. I like the idea of getting away from attributes and leaning on the tag system. But I actually like what you were saying quite a bit too. But it sounds like both of us are on the idea of we don't want we want it to be generally a lot easier to pick up.
Yeah, for sure. I don't know. So I like the idea. I like the concept of using the tags. I am worried that you'd mentioned before you want a rules light game that leans more trad and that has more, like, a little bit more crunch to it. I'm worried that if we lean so much into the tags, that is potentially going to cause an issue. Because if we're leaning entirely onto the tags, even for like the characters, who they are and their abilities and all that stuff, what is inevitably going to happen? I mean, think about how big your average character sheet is, especially when you're like a level 20 character. By the time somebody has like that level 20 character in this game, they're going to have like 30 fucking tags that they've accrued, right?
No. So my idea here is like eliminating the idea of progression, and like when you take on a patron, like you can only take on so many powers, you can only have so many bonds, and you can only carry so much equipment. So the idea is that it is limiting in its construct. Like by like we develop this set piece that is the character sheet, and you can't fill out more than these 3 or this 4 or whatever. Now you can change patrons and get a different power set and change your character's direction. But like you can't just accrue and accrue and accrue. Like I think part of the idea is like loss and change, right?
Okay. I mean, that definitely, what I will say is that really fits the narrative idea of this world, right? We have all of these genres and like archetypes that have been kind of slammed together in this universe. Kind of makes sense that like I've gone as far in the samurai deal as I can go to. Now I'm gonna go be like a hoplite or something like
Yeah.
that. I I am worried that that's not going to be appealing to other people who have spent all of this time building a samurai who now can no longer do anything with it. And they just say, well, I guess now I have to be a marine or now I have to be a librarian or whatever.
I don't think so. I think that you could make like a set of samurai powers that you can slot in and out. You can like change your loadout, so to speak, and you can still have like your samurai powers, your samurai archetype, and then throw different equipment archetypes on top of it. So like you have more of a modular shifting of things, but
Okay.
but I mean, like the idea, like, and maybe you can unlock progression in the sense that you can unlock a more powerful tag, and you can replace your old one with it because you're doing a more powerful thing.
Yeah.
But I don't want like that. I don't want to do that like D&D spell card thing where it's just like builds and builds and builds and builds and builds and builds.
Yeah. I mean, here's the thing. I agree. I really like the idea that at most your character can have like 5 tags or something like that. I would say even if we're going to talk about like equipment and stuff, 3 tags that they can just slot in and out depending on where the story goes and like how their character develops. Because if you think about it really, right, it's very few people in the universe who really progress in a singular like linear line, right? Like I was a history professor who like had sunk all of their like experience points into like learning history and teaching history, and I did that for 5 years, and now I'm an SEO writer. Like you go so far, and then at a certain point you do kind of stop.
Well, and like I think you can like on the topic of like progression too, is you can do it in a naturalistic way too. Like we've talked about bonds and agreements and deals and stuff. Like if you were to tie these powers specifically to those bonds and deals, when those resolve, you could lose those things depending on how they resolve, right?
Yeah.
Or you can be bequeathed things because of how they resolve.
Yeah.
So I think you can do it in a naturalistic way where it doesn't feel like I'm just building towards this progression. It's I have to follow this story beat, and that is going to dictate what my character does.
Okay, so let me toss something at you then that just came to mind. So I like the idea that you have a d20 that you roll, and then if one of your tags apply, then you can like roll an additional d20. That makes perfect sense to me. How do we go about making sure that the tag construction for these players aren't easily spammed? Like, so an example would just be like, I have a character who's really just smart. They're just smart about everything. So my character takes the smart tag. Does that just mean that anything involving a brain, my character now has a D20?
I think we would have to write them, like our example tags would have to be specific, first and foremost, because we were going to be setting the stage for what the tags can be. So we'll have to do like, write them as specialized knowledge, maybe like I'm a chemist instead of I am smart.
Sure.
And I think that is one step. The idea of not spamming, I think that there's a couple routes around that. I think you could limit things by scene, which is a very popular way to do things.
For sure.
You could limit the ability to be able to like chain or apply tags in a row, right? Like if I had just utilized the tag, then I don't get to utilize it until like I have utilized another tag in that scene. You can You could also like, especially like if you've succeeded with a tag, maybe it needs to. I just I got like a nascent idea, and I don't know how to describe it, but like it would be neat to apply a heat system to your die rolls, or maybe specifically to tags, where it's like the better you do, the easier it is to make them do something incredible with them until like you reach this like flashpoint and you do something great, but then the tag resets and you can't do anything with it because like you've blown your load.
Burned it out basically. I don't hate that idea, honestly. I think that it'd be a really good way of preventing players from spamming a really useful tag.
Or encouraging them to a certain point, right? Like, it puts you on that nice edge where it's like, if I spam this, I can, like, waste this heat. But if I don't use it, I can't build it. Which, like, I do like falling onto that, like, what are you going to do kind of territory with mechanics.
Well, that's what I mean, though, is, like, if you don't have that mechanic of, like, it burns out if you use it, then at that point, the power is going to be spammed, right? Yeah. If somebody says, like, yeah, I'm just a really smooth talker, and you can even get specific with it, like, I'm really good at bribing people, then, like, what they're going to do the entire game is bribe people. But if you make it so that, like, okay, you can bribe your way out of this fucking crime boss, but if you do, you lose that tag and you have to, like, start with another one. I think that's a cool fucking idea.
So maybe it's maybe they just like black out for the rest of the session or the rest of the arc. But like maybe session's the way to go. I like session-based rules a lot.
Yeah.
But maybe this is it. Like, when you succeed on a roll utilizing a tag, it gains heat. And each time that it gains heat, you can do more incredible things with the tag. You get a higher bonus. Maybe it is a D20 where you just add like a modifier to it. But you could do like more incredible things with it. And then at the third time that you succeed, you can do something totally rad with it, but then it burns out, right? Like you flip it over if it's a card and you can't use it until the start of next session or until something narrative happens that resets it. Every time you fail, you take away heat. So it doesn't just build and build and build. You can like fail a roll and bring down the heat on something. So you could be encouraged to do something very difficult. You're like, well, I might lose some heat on this and I kind of need to. I kind of like that idea. Like, well,
and that's it's a cool thing too, because it doesn't always work in the player's favor, right? If they're like building up heat to try and convince this guy of something, and they've brought that tag all the way up to 3, and then the fucking GM brings in like, oh, this is your mom. She like wants a favor of you that you really don't want to do, and it's like, well, fuck. Now I have to blow this like persuasion tag on this person. Like it's very it's I think balanced in a way that is spammable both by players and by GMs as well. And I think that balance is kind of what I would be looking for.
So on the character sheet you would have like 3 like intrinsic power tags, like, and these would, or maybe you'd have 3 intrinsic power tags, and then like each one of them tied maybe to an ability, so that like when you reached your heat on something, like 3 heat on something, and you got a successful roll with it, you can fire off on this ability, and you can do it at different heat levels to, I don't know, maybe that's too fiddly, but do it at different, like, if you do it at a 2, it doesn't do as much. If you do it at a 1, it does basically nothing. Like, you light fire on your fingertips compared to, like, throwing a fireball, compared to making a meteor shower with 3rd heat power activation. But then you have, like, 3 intrinsic ones based on, like, your character's current archetype and patron and, goal. Is that what we were calling it? Score to settle.
Score to settle.
So you'd have your score to settle tag, your patron tag, and your archetype tag. And then you'd have like an equipment tag and like maybe a background tag or maybe 2 equipment tags. I don't know, whatever one you think, but those would have like the same deal. And those could change, right? You can lose equipment. Equipment can become depowered. You can settle your score. You can change your archetype, and you can maybe background shouldn't be it, but
I mean the concept is kind of there though, right?
Right.
Is that each of these tags would have a kind of heat score that leads you to being able to do crazy shit with what you have.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that way you do still get around the whole like stat array, all that, while still making the rolls modular.
Everybody starts with 1 movement. I think maybe you have like maybe wound points are dealt with like conditional tags, right? Like if you've taken on too many conditional tags, you have to take on like a robust bad tag for your character and it resets, and like then you can take more damage up to a certain point. So like you gain these permanent like fucked up tags by taking too much damage, or not necessarily damage, but like trauma or whatever.
Right.
But that way you like everyone's got like a 3 heart meter and like it resets. It doesn't necessarily like kill you when it resets. It's just like you get a tag applied to you based on the conditional tags on you, and that's permanent.
That's a neat idea.
Yeah.
All right. Sick. Okay, cool. So we covered movement, we covered tags, we covered what does a crit look like? What is that?
Okay. This we need to solve our resolution mechanic, and like it's either you are gathering or removing from a die pool and rolling and taking the highest, or it is you're rolling a d20 and relevant tags add like +2, +4 with 1 heat, +4 with 2 heat, +6 with 1 heat, with 3 heat kind of thing. I don't know. Maybe we need to sit on it for a second.
My interpretation was you roll a d20, and then if you have an applicable tags, it is an additional d20 that you add.
Right.
And if you're successful on the roll, then it builds the heat. Correct?
Yeah. I think that can work. Do we want to go d20? Because a handful of d20s is a lot to roll.
A handful of d20s is a lot to roll. If you think that a d10 is more manageable, then I'm down with that.
Yeah, I think it is.
Or if you want to just do your beloved D12s, I know you love a good dodecahedron.
I do, but they're also kind of a lot to hold.
Yeah. Okay,
a D10 is probably the way to go.
So we're gonna shoot with D10. So tied to an ability.
By the way, I thought of a modifying explosive thing for Vault Peddlers that I think is going to solve a lot of our explosive issues.
Sick. All right, 1 second here. Constitute an additional D10 when used. Okay, sick. Yeah. And so when you're rolling with a tag, it's basically rolling with advantage, right? That's like you're rolling 2 and then taking the highest one.
Yeah, and if it's if it's a tag that is a disadvantage tag, then you would do the opposite, right? You would you'd either take the lowest on the roll, or
explain to me, how would a disadvantage tag work? That couldn't be on like an intrinsic power tag, right?
No, I think these would either have to be like permanent tags you'd take on from taking all of your heart's worth of damage, like wounds or trauma or whatever.
Okay.
And then you would have like a disadvantage tag that could be applicable in situations like fucking arachnophobia. Now I have the arachnophobia tag, and anytime I'm dealing with like a spider situation, I'm going to, instead of taking the highest on this roll, I'm going to take the lowest on this roll.
Okay. So these would be, are these built-in quirks on the Are these built-in quirks on the character sheet, or are these just like environmental things that you introduce as GM?
I think these could be built in. So these would, I think you'd probably start with one, and then it would be based on you taking wound points, basically.
Yeah.
Once you've filled out your heart all the way, now you're taking on a permanent disadvantage. And that can be like, in the case I just described, like you guys were fighting a bunch of like robot spiders. Now I have like the technophobia thing or the arachnophobia tag,
Right.
and my heart's reset, but I have a permanent disadvantage when dealing with those things.
Okay. So I'm down with that.
I'm not married to the rolling system too.
I actually like the rolling system. That's actually not where my issue is. My issue is the disadvantage tag being applied by players upon character creation versus versus this thing happened in the story and now your character's afraid of spiders, so now you have the disadvantage tag when you deal with spiders.
I mean, maybe it's both, though, right? Like, we talked about background or scores to settle. Yeah. Maybe you start with a disadvantage tag based on your score to settle. Based on the score to settle.
I like that. I like that a lot. Okay. Let's do a tag that gives disadvantage. Can't spell. Certain roles. Okay, cool.
I like it. Man, I really like the idea of tags heating up. I'm like,
the heat system is very neat. It's very unique. I like it a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah. Nah, man, whenever we start looking at new shit, I always am like, oh, this is like a fancy new toy. We've been on Vault Peddlers for the last year and a half, and
we've been on Vault Peddlers for a year and a half, and we know the mistakes that went into the foundation of it, right? It is what it is. I forgot we were on stream, and I've just been talking to Taylor.
Yeah.
No, we should probably raid somebody.
I was about to say, I feel like this is actually a good place to drop off. We are probably just going to cut tonight short, just because it's been such an unexpected evening. But we do hope you've enjoyed kind of a little behind the screen peek at what's coming beyond Vault Peddlers. It'll probably be honestly a long way down the line before we really get to dive into this game, but it's a cool little thing that we get to show you.
It's coming together.
Yeah. All right, cool. Well then, thanks so much for tuning in, y'all. We're going to raid somebody, but we're going to go to the waiting room here for just a minute while we figure out who to raid. So see y'all later. Have a good one.